You are listening to Missed Apex Podcast. We live F1. Welcome to Missed Apex Podcast. I'm your host, Richard Reddy, but my friends call me Spanners. So, let's be friends. It's the summer break. And, well, all the lazy and slightly rubbish podcasts rest up on a beach somewhere. We see this as the best time to make content because, frankly, these days there is so much news and so many races that all F1 content is on rails. So to get a little break like this and to do things that we want to do and explore topics we want to explore can be quite fun. So there's still going to be a crew of varying competence bringing you F1 content until we get revving and racing once again in September. So today we'll look at some of the top news stories, but we'll also look at how the rookies have fared and are faring, and we'll look at the percentage of team points each driver has scored. After all, your biggest rival in F1 is your teammate in the same car. And at the end of the show, I'm going to replay the recent interview I had with Jan Maldenborough and Archie Madekwe, the stars of the new sim racer turned real race driver movie from Sony Pictures called Gran Turismo, based on a true story. And you'll see how excited I am during the interview because Sony included Missed Apex on the official press junket. So I got to see the first UK screening at Sony Pictures, which was very, very exciting. And then we got included in, that press junket where the actors are there having. I was the very last interview of a 2-day virtual press junket tour. So I could see their faces at the beginning. They were exhausted, but trying their best to be enthusiastic. But actually, seconds into the interview, we had a really great chat about the movie and about racing and about sim racing. So we'll play that at the end of the show. We are an independent podcast produced in the podcasting shed with the kind permission of our better halves. We aim to bring you a race review before your Monday morning commute. We might be wrong, but we're first. I've got a panel, and the first person on that panel is the only person I need to be better than. It's my first rival. It's my teammate, Matt. 2 rumpets. Hello, Matt.
1 down, 3 to go.
1 what down, 3 to go?
Week.
Oh, of
so
the
we're
summer
back
break.
to racing.
Are you counting this down like sleeps till Christmas?
Exactly.
Do you know what though, Matt? With so many races, I'm fine with the summer break. I'm quite pleased of the summer break because they've been rolling and hitting us so fast.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing you bring up. I'm not sure because as we've had more races, it feels like more work. And I'm not sure if it's that just because of that iterative getting better every season, having to put more effort in for less gain content wise, or if I've just gotten old and the same amount of work is just that much harder.
I mean, it's barely work. We're talking about the race cars going fast. And yes, I will always, on any given Sunday, if you say there's a Grand Prix, I'm happy. But when it comes to content, we used to always, we really enjoy our winter content. We enjoy our summer content. But there just used to be a lot more of a gap between races to go, all right, let's go and find people for an interview. But, now the news cycle is so much more. It's not just random rumors from Italian websites because the news cycle just keeps on pounding. So we've got 4 or 5 major news stories in the summer breakdown, which never really used to be the case.
Yeah, and that's because, like us, the journalists are busy just covering what happens in the races before they get a chance to catch up and spark the stories that we want to talk about too.
Exactly. So they take a deep breath and go, oh, by the way, I heard that Sainz has a contract with Audi, for example. Yeah. There we go.
Or Binotto's going to be team principal at Alpine.
Spoilers, here we go. And Matt's the teammate, but we've got a junior driver lurking in the wings, ready to take her place and replace us at any given moment. It's Chris Stevens. Hey, Chris.
Still 3 weeks left in the summer break. Still time to enjoy myself before the relentless pounding of Formula One returns.
Yeah, but you're a GT series commentator. Is that taking a summer break as well?
We actually are, yes. We finished up a few weeks ago now, and we're not back until early September as well. And then we have 2 races within a month as well. So that will come back quite thick and fast as well. Red Bull Ring and then Monza.
So if we're like the Red Bull / junior driver program people here on the pod, we've also got a dark horse over a plucky rival. It's Cristina Mace from the Gravel Trap F1 podcast. Hello, Cristina.
Hello. With all this talk about the countdown, I feel like we need to make advent calendars. Like get a bunch of chocolate together for the summer and just one a day.
Oh, I like that. So like day one, you open it up and a Pirelli tire pops out and hits you in the face. Day two, it's a tire warmer. Day three, sustainable fuels dribble out as a prelude to 2026. I love that. Aero upgrade. Let's do it. Let's hook up our summer advent calendar. I like that. But first, let's get on to the big dirty news. Big dirty news. So in F1, as an F1 fan, I always think you are allowed to support who you support, and you're also allowed to kind of have your baddies. And I know there's a lot of baddies that I've talked about where people get upset that I would dare list their team or driver as baddies. So for example, when I say I'm not a Max Verstappen fan, massively respect what he does, and you could see on my Twitter feed, I defended from someone saying he's not one of the best people ever in F1. He's got a lot more to prove. I say no, he's absolutely already one of the best people who's ever stepped into an F1 car. So just because I'm not a fan of someone doesn't mean I won't go to war, like defending or respecting how good they are. Like I want the drivers and the teams that I see as rivals to my teams and drivers to be good, because it's in sport. It's always the adversity against greatness is what brings greatness in the people you like as well. And I get a big objection from the Tifosi as well when I say that Ferrari are still, they're the Death Star. They're the real baddies of F1. I love to hate Ferrari. I want them to be better so I can continue to hate them. But the team that I've given the most grief without getting any kind of pushback on is Alpine/Renault. No one ever gets upset at me when I say that Renault Alpine is everyone's 10th favourite F1 team. Chris?
No, I'm going to argue this slightly now because I think all this drama that they've provided has notched them up just a little bit. And let's be honest, what is the point of Alfa Romeo?
Do you know what? Alfa Romeo will definitely be featured in this show as well because Alfa Romeo, who is Sauber, is becoming Audi in a couple of seasons' time as well. But let's focus in on Alpine, Cristina, because that is a spectacle. What they have done is made a spectacle of themselves. In the F1 party, they've got a little drunk, they've started arguing amongst themselves, and now everyone has seen their dirty laundry.
I really appreciate now how everyone thought that the civil war was going to be between their drivers. But it turns out it's everybody but the drivers. They're the only ones that are actually realistically behaving and doing their jobs. A couple mistakes along the way, but they are going out and they're doing what they need to do. All of their leadership, though, is in upheaval. They're not letting Otmar and the team that has been assembled just cook and work towards becoming a team and make progress. They're kind of just saying, oh, well, we're going to start over and over and over, despite not restarting the count for their 100 race goal. It's just very poorly managed project at this point. A lot of impatience. Rome wasn't built in a day.
No, but it was, Matt. Rome was completely overrun by barbarians using their own infrastructure against them, which perhaps is what has happened over at Enstone.
Yeah, well, this is what I love. You ask yourself, well, what does a CEO of a major car company do anyway? Could I do that job? And you think, no, that must be very complicated. And then you realize that the CEO of a major car company sees that Aston turned up and was good at the start of the season and has decided to fire his entire Formula One team because of recency bias. And you think, oh, no. Even I could make better choices than that on a more than coin flip basis. Because that's really what's happened here. What's happened here is they've looked at Aston and then they looked at McLaren show up and be good for about a race and a half before they were garbage at Spa. And they've said, well, why didn't you do such a great job? And they said, well, we agreed to this timeline and we're working on it. We're doing better. And one person said, I could do better. And that's it. The whole leadership is out the window. And that one person who said they could do it quicker is now in charge. And I have more on that, but I can see other people want to get in.
No, look, I just want to compliment like the way you've brought that across. Firstly, I wasn't thinking of it in the same kind of sofa, like, you know, with Ferrari, where armchair strategists going, well, I wouldn't have double stacked them there. But we're armchair CEOs now. We've been promoted. We can be armchair CEOs. But the other angle I hadn't looked at was the fact that Aston Martin have this kind of almost inherent, that outfit tactic of, okay, well, let's look at what the other teams are doing. Let's front load development. Let's hit the ground running. Has actually like puts the pressure on the midfield. So I wasn't thinking of the likes of Sauber and Alpine being under pressure from that Aston Martin start.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't think so because they have a plan and they have an incredibly experienced leadership. Alan Permain, 34 years in the sport. Otmar ran Force India when they had $3 a year to invest and somehow still managed to finish fifth with the team. They have two drivers who are respected and fast and can score points in a car, including a podium and a third in a sprint race this year. And they have an engine that is, and yes, Chris Stevens, I'm going to say this, 20 to 30 brake horsepower under the other engine manufacturers. And despite that handicap, they still find themselves hanging on by their fingernails. And it just seems like to me that if we're going to look at where the real problems are in this team, I don't think it's the leadership of the Formula One team where we need to be pointing our gaze.
Oh, I 100% agree with you, Matt. I think this is a much more systemic brand issue that's very akin to Toyota's massive downfall in Formula One. That was the most expensive mistake that Toyota made, and I can feel Alpine going in the same direction, where they have this distinct lack of understanding of how Formula One actually works. And this is coming off of the back of not only losing two amazing drivers last season in the form of Fernando Alonso and Oscar Piastri, but then a change of CEO as well, followed by firing all the top line management of the Formula One team itself, expecting them to have gotten all the parts together, put them in a cooker and it to be ready like a microwave meal, when actually you need to slow cook this. You need to be a little bit patient and come back at the end of the day when it's very nicely roasted. For me, the biggest debacle out of all of this was literally just following the CEO departure, which the media are going to have questions about anyway. They then decided to make this announcement on a Friday afternoon when they are surrounded by media. And not only that, the people that they've fired are the ones open to the media, leaving them ample opportunity to just slander the brand,
to be
which
fair,
is exactly what they did.
Sort of. I think, well, Otmar did sort of...
Slander's probably the wrong word.
No,
but
I think he was quite...
slammed the brand.
Obviously, Otmar Schaffnauer gave his opinion and he said, you know, he had a tearful goodbye and it all seemed a little bit sudden, but I think he was very respectful to the brand. I think he put his case across, but it absolutely smacked off. Do you not think so?
I mean, looking back at some of the quotes, he clearly feels very strongly about how he and his team have been treated by the higher ups.
Oh no, it absolutely smacks of there was a recent and intense falling out, and that no one was expecting it to land just before the Grand Prix, because there's no way you're right, Chris. There's no way you plan that. But the way Alpine is kind of just firing people left, right, and centre, and then they suddenly push forward a guy who I don't think anyone has heard of or seen within Formula One, and you go, well, is that the HR person? I don't know, but like it's as if in Missed Apex we just started firing everyone, and then suddenly Kyle's in charge. Imagine it would be a MotoGP podcast before you know it. Cristina, get yourself in, Matt, and then Matt.
For sure. The other thing that was pointed out by one of the other team principals, I want to say Vassar at Ferrari, was that even if you fire people, lining up their replacement in Formula One takes time because of gardening leave, because of those extended contracts. So not only have they gotten rid of a whole bunch of new people mid-season, because Otmar, 18 months he's been in this role. That is relatively new still for the whole picture. So they just keep shooting themselves in the foot and then expect that they're going to be able to run a marathon. It's just mistake after mistake. And especially from, I want to say it's the CEO, it might be another person in leadership, but they have less experience in Formula One than Otmar does. And then the other people that were in those leadership positions. You just have to have trust in the people that you've hired and let them do their job. And they're not.
I am looking up. I'm trying to look up Matt because I mean no disrespect to the person who's been put in as team principal, but I couldn't remember their name. Is their name coming to mind?
Bruno Famine.
Okay, cool. I tried to just look it up on the internet, and Alpine new team principal. There's nothing. No, I don't think anyone's bothered writing about this individual, so we have absolutely no idea who is really in charge. From a fan point of view, I hope they know.
I was going to say, allow me to tell you a story.
Yay, story
Bruno
time.
Famine, who was appointed head of Viry Châtillon, which is where Renault makes the power unit for the Alpine car, in 2022 as the power unit freeze approached in Formula One. He came from Peugeot Motorsport, where he had a reasonably successful career. And at the engine freeze, we now discover the power unit they brought forward is 20 to 30 horsepower under Ferrari.
Oh, it's this guy.
Red Bull, Honda, and Mercedes. Am I missing out any? No, that would be 4 with Renault, so that's correct. Somehow they've managed to get behind in an engine freeze with this guy running the factory.
Oh, no.
And he then tells, apparently, now this I don't have good sourcing on, but the story I've seen is that there was a disagreement timeline-wise between Luca De Meo, the CEO of all of Renault, and the Formula One team in terms of Rossi and Safnauer and Pat Fry and Alan Permain, who said, we really do need about 5 years to make this happen the way you want. That's just realistic in Formula One. And I looked at some other teams. We can talk about that later. And apparently a promise was made. And they was like, no, there's a way to do it faster. And so exit Safnauer, Pat Fry and Alan Permain, just the two of them together have close to 60 years of Formula One experience. And now this guy, Bruno Famine, who's been at Renault since 2022 and been in charge of one underwhelming project, is going to make Alpine as good as Aston and Ferrari and Mercedes in a much shorter period of time. I, for one, am looking forward to this, but mostly for the comedic value.
It's amazing that we hear so much about this 100 race program or development plan, and they've made very, very little tangible or visible progress in terms of moving up the order. They seem to be that steady 5th place in the Constructors' Championship, absolutely bang average since Renault, the Renault name came back after Lotus. And remembering it's still the same Team Enstone that took Fernando Alonso to 2 world titles 20 years ago or so. But throwing on top of the huge embarrassment that was Spa, on top of the huge embarrassment that is asking the FIA for help with their engine.
Oh my God, we haven't even talked about that yet.
Exactly, goodness. Right? Bearing in mind that the whole reason they rebranded from Renault to Alpine was to amp up the Alpine name, because nobody had really heard of the name Alpine, outside of Renault HQ basically, and maybe some old rally stuff back in the 80s. Exactly, it wasn't the well-known brand. So
now it's EV only now as well.
Yeah, pretty much. And right now, the only headlines about Alpine are about what a disorganized and embarrassing mess it is. If I'm now in charge of Alpine, I'm looking at Mario Andretti sniffing around to buy a Formula One team and suddenly thinking, this might not be such a bad idea now.
This is it, Matt. Renault were never in it. They never committed. Pre-budget cap, they could have Mercedes'd it. They could have.
Yes, absolutely. I'm not going to disagree with you. And I've even seen in certain news stories that Otmar asked for a $50 million spend that Renault refused till they got the new investors through Ryan Reynolds' organization that came in. So it's not like they've even been giving Otmar carte blanche to spend as he wants. They've still been holding the purse strings tight. But my curiosity about that power unit has led me to wander down the woulda, coulda, shoulda path. And if you have a minute, I'd like to share with you my findings.
He's going to share them anyway, guys. You have to just let it roll at this point.
I've worked very hard to use as few numbers as possible, but here it goes. 30 brake horsepower, talking to a couple of experts, equates to about 0.3 of a second a lap. And I went through and said, what would happen if both cars were 0.3 of a lap faster? Where would they have finished? And this is what I found. They would have been about 2.25 places higher in every race than they actually finished. In qualifying, it was about good for about 2.4 places. In terms of average points gained per race, 6.4 average points. So what happens if I just do that math? Well, now they have 115 points. But the other thing they managed to do that I think is truly remarkable is they managed to not finish either driver in 3 consecutive races, and not 3 consecutive races, but in 3 races out of the 12. So I said, well, since we're being generous with our time here, let's give them those 3 races based sort of on where they finished in qualifying, just average points per race. And at this point, if they just had 0.3 a lap, if they just had a power unit that was equal to the Ferrari, Mercedes, and the Red Bull, they'd have 153 points to Ferrari's 191 to Aston's 196, and they'd be very much in the fight for 4th best team, maybe 3rd best, because there's other technical things we could talk about too, namely, and to wit, they've been responsible for a lot of the technology things we've said is an innovation on Aston and this and that. They actually really started with Alpine, who I think did have a very clever designer in Matt Harmon working very hard. And it's really a shame to see the effort gutted like this by what I would simply refer to as a clueless C-suite.
I mean, yeah, if we give them a magical extra 30 brake horsepower and forgive all of their DNFs and forgive all of the driver errors, then yes, I'm sure it would look like a very different picture in the World Championship, Matt. But the problem is, even if you give them that extra 30 brake horsepower, they can't run those engines reliably anyway, let alone when you give them even more power, because they've always decided to go for power over reliability. And we saw how much that worked last year when Fernando Alonso would be running in 6th or 7th and then that engine would explode in someone's face.
Or even 2014. By the way, I meant to clap that. That was a very long and impassioned story. And for once, I listened to all of it, which is a sign of how engaging it was.
It was fair enough. I was taking the mick a little bit there, Matt, but it was really good.
Well, thank you very much. I just wanted to benchmark how bad the power unit was affecting the rest of the Formula One team. And then for them to be blamed for it, it's so unfair to me. It just is crazy.
Amazing. And that person is now in charge of the whole project. He's very keen to tell us that it's a project. He has a project. There will be a project. There's a project happening. The details of the project will be forthcoming. But oh my goodness, I think it was him having the microphone shoved in his face was maybe a new experience.
I have a slight clarification here, because in the our live chat room.
Oh, hi patrons.
Yes, hello patrons. So if you want to join our live chat room, subscribe to us on patreon.com/missedapex. That's an ad-free feed as well.
It does have an ad-free feed and some extra bonus content on the Friday before the race.
Heck yeah.
And you'll be first to know of any events that we're planning.
Yes, absolutely. Please
support us. Me and Matt need food. Matt can only afford an instrument that has only 3 buttons. So imagine, with your Patreon support, he could play an instrument with more buttons, or that one that slides forwards and backwards.
Or maybe even one with strings, multiple strings.
A string one. That would be way better than trumpets. Anyway, Chris, sorry.
Yes, there was a question in the chat that says, what's this about Alpine being tight with money? Aren't they spending bang on the cost cap? Well, of course, the cost cap is really, in reality, only a small part of what it costs to run a Formula One team these days, because it really comes down to development largely and building the core car. But there's so many more expenses in terms of running a team. And of course, one thing that doesn't come under the cost cap is driver salary. And there are all sorts of inventive
ways. They can only
ways.
Afford Ocon.
Yeah, exactly, and Pierre Gasly. Of course, there's all sorts of clever workarounds around that as well. You redistribute where the money's actually coming from, where it's being spent on in terms of the actual books. So it's not just a case of, because we're now up to a cost cap, that's the only money that they're spending, and therefore it's the only money you need.
Moving on, as much as I'd want to, we can't just have a go at Renault for this whole time. But one of the most interesting stories that's popped up, and don't worry, we will get to the teammate percentages and the rookie, how the rookies are doing. But one of the stories doing the rounds is that Carlos Sainz has a pre-contract with Audi, and that the reports are and I'm sure Matt will tell me the sources at some point. The reports are that he is not, bound to definitely be at Audi, but that there's an option. So, they're talking about it. And I think it's worth clarifying to newer F1 fans as well that this is the Sauber outfit founded by Peter Sauber. And it has a really rich history in Formula One, the Sauber outfit. But it's never been a front runner. And it has been rebadged at various times. I'm going to get a little bit of pushback on that last comment. But, they've run Ferrari engines quite a lot. They've been badged as Petronas engines. They have more recently been the Alfa Romeo team that Bottas and Guan Yu Zhou are at. But that is really a glorified title sponsor. It was very much being run by the Sauber team. So I'm sure we'll have some discussion going forward. I definitely know Chris and Matt will have some insight into what is Audi's involvement. Is it going to be an Alfa Romeo type thing where they're just badging it, or are Audi coming in and taking over and having like a real concerted push at an F1 effort? But the thing I want to focus on first is Carlos Sainz. So, Cristina, if you're Carlos Sainz's agent and Audi is coming in to take over the Sauber team, what do you make of the rumours, and would you be advising Carlos Sainz to take that up?
This is very classic Carlos. We've seen him time and time again decide to switch teams because it wasn't suiting his best interest.
That's a good point.
He's constantly looking ahead. And he said it himself that because he is not the fastest on pace, he wasn't one of those prodigy drivers, that he's always had to have, yes, on-track skill, but always have to also be thinking about the off-track stuff. It's why we see him being so good at making those strategy calls. And this very much feels like that. He is looking ahead. He is thinking, where can I best be suited for myself? It's something that he's always done well. His jump from Toro Rosso into the Renault, into the McLaren, and then up to Ferrari, very well played. And I think that this is just an extension of the kind of thinking he's always done. It does not surprise me at all that he's looking to another team where he could be number one and where he could also just help build up a new team around him. That's the very smart move.
That's the big dream, though, isn't it, Cristina, for any driver that's kind of not doing well, not pushing for the title, but is, has high stock. Everyone wants to do the Hamilton to Mercedes, but we've seen a lot of very poor examples of that. So we've seen Alonso to McLaren to lead the team and rebuild it. We have seen Daniel Ricciardo go to Renault to try and rebuild it, and we've just seen a lot of those. I guess what do you call them? Like Hail Marys. It's like a Hail Mary career move. We've seen a lot more of those fail than we have seen succeed.
Very true. But I think if anyone can do it, it's going to be Carlos. We've seen him make good move after good move. And I kind of trust his instinct on it more than I would other drivers. And again, we've seen him make those good calls that aren't included in his job description as driver.
Okay, but lastly, sorry, I'll stop pressing this point at the moment, Cristina. But what does that say about how he feels at Ferrari? Because he's already in a top 3 team.
Yeah, but Ferrari's a bit of a gong show as well. Like they
okay, I would never say that about Ferrari. Never.
They have a lot of problems that they need to solve, and they don't seem to be willing to listen to him as much as he wants. At the end of the day, I think he's going to be happiest at a team where his voice is heard, especially at this point in his career where he has years of experience. Why wouldn't you be? And he has seen how other teams operate. That's a huge advantage for Audi as they're coming in and as they're trying to establish a team. Carlos has the experience of this is what all of these teams did. This is the good and bad out of all of them. It seems like a good partnership in my mind. See, Chris, Carlos Sainz is 28 years old, which is pretty much like you how old are you? 26, 25?
26.
26. So it's crunch, like 28 is really, it's crunch time. Oh, I think Cristina might be 28. Yeah. Oh, are you 28? Okay, sorry, but
I'm ready for pasture.
No, but it is that crunch time. Like you're meant to have like really had it all together by 28. So if you're still feeling a bit lost by 28, it might not work out for you. And I think that's where Carlos Sainz is, Chris.
I mean, look, I don't think it's a Hamilton to Mercedes type of Hail Mary because let's be honest, 90% of the work had already been done by Mercedes when Lewis Hamilton arrived at that team.
Yes, it had, yeah.
For me, this is more about Sainz is realizing that he's never going to be top dog at Ferrari because this rumor is going around the same time that Charles Leclerc is getting a whacking great contract extension worth nearly like 200 million or what is it, 180 or something like
crazy
something
money.
Ridiculous figure. So he's realized that he doesn't have the backing of the team. Where can he go? He's not going to end up at Mercedes most likely because even if Lewis Hamilton were to leave, Mercedes has got a raft of options that they would put in over Carlos. Being at Red Bull alongside Max, not so much a favorable option. McLaren looks like they're very much locked in for the long-term future with Norris and Piastri. So an opportunity coming up with a new manufacturer coming in and putting big investment into a team like Sauber, and just kind of backtracking to what you were talking about at the start of the segment there, Spanners, which is that, you know, this Sauber Audi deal seems very reminiscent of the BMW Sauber days back in the late 2000s and even the BMW Williams days a few years prior to that, where big manufacturer comes in, chucks a load of money at the team, big investment, big stake in the team as well, builds an engine around it and creates a works effort together with a big load of, you know, manufacturer and factory support. And that could be something that suddenly launches that team further up the grid, particularly when we have a new set of regulations coming in 2026 as well. It seems like the golden opportunity to be making a move like this.
Were you trying to out trumpets or just on length of monologue there? It was
no,
good.
I just had many points to address there.
Yeah, I mean, on quality, no. But lengthwise, it was about the same. No, it was a good point. Sorry.
That's for you too.
Oh, sorry, Chris. I feel like I've upset you. Oh, sorry. I was being mean. Matt.
All right. Well, I don't want to directly disagree with anyone here or pour cold water on this move.
That means you're about to attack someone.
But historically speaking, new teams in Formula One rarely start at the front or even close to the front.
But this is not a new team, Matt, is it? It's an existing team and
exactly.
a new manufacturer at
with
the
a
start
brand new
of a big
power unit,
change.
though. When was the last time Audi made a Formula One power unit? Oh, right, never.
And the history of teams coming into F1 with a new power unit and immediately doing well is...
No, manufacturers coming in a year late and massively underdeveloping and underestimating the
tokens,
challenge.
I know. Go ahead, run through all the excuses, please.
Audi are already invested. They've already pulled every single race program that they've done, or they will do at the end of this year.
I like the Audi people. Like as you have too. I know we've both talked with Alan McNish in the past, and I'm sure he's involved in some way in this. I want this to do well. But I want to talk about why Carlos Sainz is moving from Ferrari. And you've danced around it, but it's pretty simple in my mind. When he came there, the team principal was Binotto, and I am convinced, without having direct evidence, that he was told, if you are ahead on track, you will get the number one, you will get the primary strategy, and Leclerc behind you will get secondary strategy, as it is at Mercedes and as it is at some other teams and as it absolutely isn't at some other teams. And I think with the departure of Binotto and the arrival of Vasseur, I will just point out, do you remember, was it Hungary, where they had Sainz on the soft tire and Leclerc on the medium tire, and Sainz catches up to Leclerc, there's a gap, and you're thinking, surely they're going to let Carlos through to go attack the driver ahead.
Yeah.
And instead it was like, no, Carlos, you are now behind Leclerc on track, and you will always be behind Leclerc on track. Even if you're 5 spots ahead, we'll pitch you and take 10 minutes to change your front wheel so you finish behind him, because now Leclerc is our number one driver and he always has to score more points than you, even if it kills our standing in the Constructors' Championship. And I think he took a look at that and thought, you know what?
Yeah.
Right now, no one thinks of me as a number 2 driver.
See,
but if I stick around for this junk long enough, they will. I am out of here. And I think he's like, I'd rather be lead driver at Williams, scrapping for a point occasionally, than be permanently second to anyone that I know on my day I can beat. And I gotta say, good for you, Carlos. I applaud that.
What feed are you people listening to? Because I don't get that. I didn't get that bit of radio back and forth on mine. Was that on Canadian F1 TV, Cristina? Did you hear that full dialogue that Matt just detailed?
Quite frankly, the number of times that Carlos has been stuck behind Charles, I could not tell you which one of those conversations happened, because it keeps happening over and over and over again.
Yeah. So maybe Matt isn't inventing. Yeah.
I don't think so, but I'm glad we brought up Binotto, because I've also heard the rumor that Binotto could become team principal at Alpine. And remember, he's the one who hired Sainz in the first place, and that he might potentially be trying to, lure him to Alpine, which, I mean, that's a whole bunch more chaos to that team that we don't necessarily need.
I don't like the terminology lure, though, Cristina. It does sound quite sinister, lure, to your doom.
He's got his little fishing rod out with like number one.
Yeah, there's like a little number one on the ground, and he's following it. And every time he gets close to it, it mysteriously disappears off into the distance.
That and a very well-baked croissant.
Yeah, or a pie on a windowsill.
Exactly. But it just sounds like there are a lot of pieces. It's silly season. There's so much going on, but, we'll see where Sainz goes. He's very good at looking out for his own interests, and that'll be interesting.
And very much a rumor, Matt, we should say. Very much, but he did say, he has said. Yeah, sorry, I don't have a source to hand here, but he did seem to do an interview where he said, one of the most important things for me is that I enter 2024 knowing where my future is the next year. So he doesn't want to be sitting there like in a Bottas type situation.
No. And like I said, it's clear the tide has turned against him at Ferrari, just based on the obvious on-track action we can see. Binotto to Alpine is very interesting. The reason I tend to discount that a little bit more is he left Ferrari because he was tired of the corporate people interfering with the Formula One team. And Alpine has provided a real big example of exactly what's likely to happen if he goes there.
But Alpine, it's either like this, where it's intense and they're all over you, or they just forget about you for 5 years, which it seemed to be the case at one point.
Yeah, I don't know. I would tend to, if I was Audi, I'd have him running my power unit right now, and maybe headed for team principal when they actually join the grid.
Okay, finally, before we get on to rating the rookies and looking at the teammate percentages, we nearly dropped the ball on this one a couple of weeks ago, talking about who might be taking over as the AlphaTauri main backers, and there are now rumours that it is either going to be Orleans, or it is more widely being reported as Hugo Boss that are going to be taking over from the Red Bull sister team. And the rumour is that they will be then known as Hugo Boss Bull Racing, which it's just more on the nose. It's more on the nose that this is Red Bull having two teams. And Red Bull having two teams has been consistently infuriating me for years now, and it doesn't look like that's going to get any better. Chris?
They might drop the Hugo because they've done a lot of stuff.
So Boss Bull Racing.
Well, have you noticed all of their Hugo Boss partnership stuff in Formula One already with drivers and other teams is all just Boss? And I think it's a similar thing with their Formula E partnership as well, which I believe is coming to an end.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the part that infuriates me is if they would ever do Boss and Bulls right after each other, because that's a tongue twister on its own. And you know that people are going to stop you saying the word bulls and they're going to say balls.
Oh.
Like, I've already had nothing but people commenting that in the short video I did about it. It is like, try to imagine Crofty saying that they're like Boss Bulls are coming around the outside, or make an epic, like, this driver just won the race and it's Boss Bulls Racing. It is a tongue twister. I don't think it's going to end well. It's just a mouthful.
Especially, like, think of the poor people from South Essex. So I have friends whose surname is Bull, like Red Bull, but they can't say Bull. So when they'll say, "What's your surname?" Well, it's Derek Bull, like that, like a ball that you bounce. So they constantly have to go. They have to go Bull, or they have to say, "Oh, I'm Derek Bull," and then they have to put like their hands on top of their head, like a bull's horns, and so. So just, will nobody think of the people from Basildon? Will no one consider them, Chris?
Well, look, I think, like every team name, I mean, do we call it Mercedes, AMG, Petronas?
I do, yes.
No,
yes, I do. Every single time, yes.
Now,
Ferrari, Scuderia, Ferrari, every time. Every single time.
It'll just be, the Boss Racing or Boss GP in the Boss car.
Well, personally, I still think Toro Basso is the best one.
Toro Basso.
Yes, that is really good.
Are we going for that, Cristina? Toro Basso.
I would like that better, quite frankly. Just as long as you don't invite people to say bulls and balls, that's just a disaster waiting to happen. Especially if Red Bull eventually want to sell their second team, get a profit, or just do anything with it. You want to increase the team's value and not have it weekly being ridiculed and memed and become just like a laughing tongue twister.
Oh, Chris, it's a load of bullocks.
Yes. Somebody somewhere at a barbecue is listening to this and has just very quickly turned around and go, "What did he just say?" But what's interesting to me about this is that it's the first time that Red Bull has kind of given up the naming rights to this team.
True.
In terms of
what
we're going to be knowing it as in the shorthand, because since they bought the Minardi team, it's been Toro Rosso, which is Red Bull in Italian, and then AlphaTauri, which is a Red Bull fashion brand. So the fact that we're giving it up to a rival fashion brand says quite a lot about Red Bull's new intentions with Formula One, I think.
And this ultimately is really fallout from the death of Dietrich Mateschitz. This is Red Bull saying, we don't want to have to pay as much as we're paying. And if we auction off these rights to someone, then paying for this team becomes less of a drain on our Red Bull profits. And not just Red Bull, the Formula One team, but the larger corporation, the marketing corporation that is responsible for all of their motorsports activity. And along with this, we should probably mention that they're consolidating the team. I wasn't clear if they were getting rid of the Faenza shop entirely, but most of the activity will now be in England, in a town that apparently is called Bicester, but is spelled Bicester, and locals inform me is actually pronounced wedding cake.
Yeah, no, don't, right? Because I remember like just being a truck driver and I was looking on a map and I pulled over nearby and I asked someone, because it's spelt Bicester, and I said, like,
exactly,
is Bicester around here? And like, you can't possibly know if you don't know that it's pronounced Bicester. And it's and this lady just was like, oh my goodness! After pretending she didn't know what I meant, then was like, oh, you mean Bicester? Oh, shut up! You know exactly what I meant, and it's the same with
Spanners.
Shut up, Chris. You're about to defend Toaster as well, which is clearly Towchester.
Clearly wrong.
I was going to say.
Near Silverstone, where Silverstone is, that is clearly Towchester, not Toaster, and I won't have a word said otherwise.
But you've lived in England, Spanners, for a long time. You know we spell places weird, all right?
We are bad at how things are said and spelt.
It's not Leicester. It's, it's...
It should be.
Okay, I know, it probably should be. It's like watching Americans trying to name UK towns. It is hilarious. I mean, for me, personally, Bicester, I just call it, the worst shopping centre in the world.
I've completely forgotten what the topic is, to be honest. I'm now just furious about Toaster and Bicester. Yeah, there we go. Or Bicester. I've forgotten what they are.
I had no idea it would trigger you so badly.
So upsetting. Sorry, Matt, you had a point, I think.
No, my point was that as part of this, they're consolidating a lot of the activities in England rather than in Italy, which should offer them a much better base of technical knowledge to be hired and drawn upon than where they are now. But it's clearly Red Bull looking to both improve performance of this team and cut costs at the same time. And the other thing they have in common is Lauren Mekies, formerly of Ferrari, I believe, as their new team principal to replace Franz Toast, who is, of course, Toast at the end of the season.
Nice. Pretty good segue. I think that'll do us as we move on to the old teammate battle whatsits. All right, we're going to start. Let's start with the rookies, because that was going to be my main focus for this show, was the rookie battle. So I think we're going to start at Williams, where Alex Albon finds himself up against new American hope, Logan Sargent. So we need to establish really here some loyalties, because I like when people declare who they're supporting, and I don't mind a little bit of like national bias. So if you're American and you want to support Logan Sargent and you want to let that affect and cloud his performance, that's fine. And you'll hear from Matt, and he will have a distorted American view of Logan Sargent's performance. But we declare that up front. But where does Canada lie on this, Cristina? Like, when you hear there's an American driver in F1, do you instantly, do you try and put a hex on him? Do you bite your thumb at him?
No. Quite frankly, as long as no one mistakes us for being Americans, we really don't care.
You don't mind. Just stay out of the way.
The number of people on TikTok who assume that I'm American and are like, typical American. And I'm like, don't you dare.
How dare you?
I'm from Canada. I am kind. I am polite. There's a lot going on in the States. And yes, there are nice Americans, yada, yada, yada. But polite, the world's perception of Americans is different than the Canadians, you know? And at the end of the day, Logan, he actually hasn't spent that much time in the States either. Like, he grew up doing the European circuit.
Right.
So even though it's like, oh my gosh, he's American, it's like he's really not that American, which is an interesting just cultural study at the end of the day. But as far as his performance goes, it's very much he's settling in. He's making all of those rookie mistakes you would kind of expect from a typical rookie. He's sounds so dejected on the radio and disappointed in himself, which gains him a lot of sympathy from me, of just like, yep, you made a mistake, bud. I'm glad you know it and acknowledge it. He has high standards from himself, is what I'm taking from that, which bodes well. It's always good when you're able to be self-critical of yourself, especially at that high of a level. So I'm anticipating that he will start doing better. And Vowles seems, as a team principal, to be very willing to be patient with a rookie, which puts Sargent in such a good place.
So Canadians are deluded about Logan Sargent as well. I didn't know. I didn't realize this, Matt. So you and Cristina, samesies.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, the Canadian, America, we're all on the same continent here, so we got the stuffs in common, you know?
Yeah, anyway. Canada and Alaska, pretty much the same.
Yeah, basically. We just call our sofas different things. Anyway. Logan Sargent, he is a talented driver. As a rookie, if you ask my honest opinion, I would grade him as a C. He's doing exactly what I would expect a rookie to do. He's not doing that much better. He's definitely not doing that much worse. His best finished has been an 11th in a Williams, which I think is an achievement for anybody. We can all acknowledge. He was very nearly through to Q3 in Saudi Arabia, except for that weird track limits thing. And his best three finishes have been 11th, 12th, and 13th. And twice now, he's finished ahead of Alex, although that was early in the season. So I think as the season has gone on, he's gotten up into his own head a little bit, trying to find that last little bit of performance. And he just needs to, well, I would just say, if I was, literally all you got to do is just settle down and drive the car, son. You'll be fine. Yeah. Stop overthinking it.
See, he's being impatient.
Oh, Chris, early on, you and I in the Missed Apex project, we had the discussion about whether to bring North Americans into the project, and you said absolutely not. They're nuts. And why didn't I listen to you, Chris? Why didn't I listen?
I know. No one ever heeds my advice, and they always regret it. Always.
Bring some order into this. Logan Sargent has done nothing but disappoint in his rookie year.
I don't know about disappoint. I mean, we would be nice if he was a bit closer to Alex, especially since the cars got more competitive as the season's gone on, and they've started to find their feet on certain circuits, like the low downforce circuits, because the Williams is a very slippery car, and so with the ones on the long straight, they tend to do quite well. It's where Alex has been scoring the points, but he's not matching Alex in terms of that. He's not going with him. So I'd say in terms of a rookie, he's probably bang on the barometer that De Vries is massively behind and Piastri is way ahead of.
Matt?
I will disagree.
Of course,
because
you will.
I think, I mean, like, honestly, we'll get to Piastri in a minute, but in terms of where a rookie is, the main issue with the Williams is the tires. Alex has multiple years experience learning how to manage Pirelli tires in a Formula One car. Logan only has one. And that's why you will see him, especially in the race, fall away, because he's still learning how to do those jobs that Alex has already learned how to do. This is classic rookie. I think in this series, with the lack of testing for rookies, I think you have to really give them 2 full seasons to properly evaluate them. We'll get to why De Vries didn't get 2 full seasons in a minute, I'm sure. But Piastri has finished ahead of his teammate exactly 1 time more than Sargent has.
That's
so
like
a lot of what you're saying is Piastri being brilliant is actually Piastri being in simply a much better car that can finish higher up the grid. I would argue.
Oh, Chris,
not
please.
in the slightest.
Yeah.
That is a classic case of statistics being deliberately misleading.
How is that misleading? I told you exactly what the statistic was, didn't I?
Yes, but the statistic is rubbish. Okay.
Why?
Look
why
at
is the
how
statistic
close.
If it was a rubbish statistic, why isn't it different?
Me and Cristina can take a break.
If you look at where the relative between Norris and Piastri versus Sargent and Albon, the gap is humongous between the Williams drivers. It's been much narrower between the McLaren drivers. Let's not also forget as well that at the start of the season, that team was absolutely lost to the point where, what was it, the Austria race, for example, where Norris had the big upgrade on his car and Piastri didn't. If you just want to see how much progress that team has made in a very short space of time. So it's not just about because Piastri's been up there in the last couple of races, it's because he's been up there with Lando throughout pretty much the entire season.
Back to me. Well, I would say that the difference is the McLaren was already a better car, even the tragic version they brought at the beginning of the season, than the Williams. The Jetta certainly proves that Sargent has what it takes to finish ahead of Albon. And as I said, the difference is the McLaren is easier to manage with regards to its tires, which is why you see Piastri finishing closer. And as proof from Spa, no less, in the sprint race, we have Max Verstappen on the radio saying, I'm not worried about Piastri. I'm watching him drift his way around these corners. He's going to kill his tires. That was before the safety car made it like super easy for him. But managing your tires is an art. It's easier in a McLaren because the downforce is better, because the car is better than it is in a Williams. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up that was unrelated to the fact that you're wrong about this was that the Williams really isn't gotten that much better. It's simply come onto the tracks where it's at its best relative to the other cars. And Williams themselves admit this. They've got about Monza left where they might score points. And then after that, they're just going to be hanging on because the car hasn't really yet been developed in the way that Vowles envisions.
Bring it on. Bring it on.
Look, trumpets. There's not a single iota piece of evidence that could suggest that Logan Sargent is doing a better job in that Williams than Oscar Piastri is doing in the McLaren or would do in any other car on the grid. When you
mean aside from the ones I've already brought up?
The ones you brought up that are just excuses for Logan Sargent. It's absolute nonsense.
Okay, let's get some sense in the room. Cristina.
I'm going to bring up what I think is a very sensible point, and that's Logan Sargent. Initially, they didn't want to bring him into Formula One this year. They wanted him to have one more year in F2 and then bring him in next year. Oscar had a year as a reserve driver at Alpine where they have admitted to aggressively training him, getting him a lot of sim time. So even though they're both rookies this year, they are coming from a very different place as far as experience goes in Formula One. So in my mind, what Logan is doing is really, really good for the experience that he's had. And Piastri also, he won F3, he won F2 back-to-back. We've heard the stat a million times that it's him, Charles Leclerc, and George Russell are the only people to have done that. they're just on slightly different playing fields at this point, and comparing them is, I don't know, I think it's a fool's errand, kind of.
Chris,
Formula Renault title as well. Back to back
there
to
you
back.
go. Chris, I think you're right. The North American experiment has completely failed. I should have listened to you. I'm so sorry, my friend. But we should move on to Piastri. So Oscar Piastri, who really, like, you have to kind of put your mind back to the previous season where he was offered the seat, or it was announced that he had the seat with Alpine, and he issued a tweet saying, "Nuh-uh, no way, bro. I ain't racing for no Renault/Alpine." And you, at the time, you go, "Wow, that is some balls, really." And then you find out that Mark Webber is his agent and his driver manager, and you go, "Oh, okay, well, I guess that kind of makes sense in context." And you go, "Well, all of this means he has to be worth it." And at the beginning of the season, it didn't necessarily look like he was going to be setting the world on fire. Now, the bar for rookies at the moment is low. So Matt here, who I respect very much, says things like, "We need to give rookies 2 years to settle in." And I could already hear, Helmut Marko doesn't listen to this show, but he just had a twinge in his chest and he didn't know what it was. He went, "Oh, something's wrong in the universe. 2 years for a rookie? That is not like the Red Bull way, and that shouldn't be any way in elite sport." Can you imagine someone floundering in central midfield for Manchester United for... My football knowledge is out of date. I don't know if Man U are good anymore. Okay, let's stick to the solid teams. Imagine someone floundering for Colchester United in the midfield for 2 seasons and getting that much of a chance. But really, he's been given a third of the season, Piastri, and now he is looking genuinely on it. So he looks every bit like a Grand Prix driver, Chris, and I think that makes a mockery of Matt's give someone 2 seasons. The bar for rookies is now astronomical because Oscar Piastri has shown you can take it to Lando Norris in half a season.
This is obviously very different to what it was, say, 15 years ago, when there was an awful lot more testing opportunities. 20 years ago, there was unlimited testing opportunities. So there was plenty of time to give rookies an awful lot more mileage in a car, to do certain simulations and get through all these kind of different scenarios that they can present them with. And then they're way more up to speed by the time the season actually rolls around compared to where they are now. But for me, that does not change the fundamental fact that if you throw the rookie in at the deep end, and if they are one of the greatest racing drivers in the world, which is what Formula One is all about, then they will swim rather than sink. And I think we may well lose a lot more drivers, with this kind of mentality, but that's what sets drivers like Piastri apart from the rest.
I think so. Look, Matt, I get your let's have 2 seasons for people to get embedded in, but Lewis Hamilton, 3 races and he was already obviously a superstar. Max Verstappen, 17 years old, making a mockery of people saying that he was too young to be in the sport. When people are good, they're damn good straight away. Your head is in your hands. Your head is in your hands. Okay.
Yeah, it hurts to hear you mangle these analogies this badly. To go back to your football analogy, that would be great if your new midfielder was never allowed to practice with the team
or a football,
and only allowed to play in a game
with a ping pong
ball. As a rookie.
Yeah,
judge him then. That's what I would say.
All right. Well, okay, Matt. Okay, how about this? Show me the driver that has looked pretty bad for a season and then turned up and blown the world away. Don't drivers...
Kobayashi.
Oh, please.
He blew the world away.
He was absolutely nothing through the junior series. They put him in a Formula One car, and off he went.
You can't use Kobayashi against me all the time. You know how much I love Kamui Kobayashi.
I love him too. That's why.
But he didn't set the world on fire, did he? He didn't. The drivers that make an impression almost immediately.
And what I would say to you is that in this formula... And now, like, you're blaming me for this 2-year thing. But again, it was Franz Tost, team principal, who said this, that under these regulations with these testing restrictions, you really need 2 full years to evaluate whether or not a driver is going to adapt themselves to the Formula One rule set. And I will point out that for all everyone's like, Piastri is taking it to Norris, he's finished ahead of him in exactly 3 races. 3 races, which is 1 more than Logan Sargent has finished ahead of Albon. It's just noise right now. He's a talented driver. He clearly is got it. Don't get me wrong. He's clearly the best of the rookies. I wouldn't argue that point. But in terms of results, he has yet to show me he can manage the tires over a full Grand Prix distance like Norris can. And you see how Norris relates to him. Norris doesn't perceive him to be a threat this season for that exact reason. Because he knows on the balance of the races, it's not going to be close. If you look at the balance of the points, it's not going to be close. Piastri is no threat to Norris this season, and we are misrepresenting where they are. A lot of what Piastri has shown us is that when he's in the points and he's up front, he can and will race with people with experience and with alacrity and not being pressured into mistakes, which other drivers we've seen in those conditions will make. There I would give you, Piastri has it, but I don't think he's the full package yet. And so we need to give him another season to see where he winds up.
Well, of course, Piastri isn't the full package yet. We're talking about talent and potential here, not just how many times they've beaten their teammate over the course of the
shift those
season.
goalposts.
So that is not a shift of the goalpost in any way, shape, or form.
Oh my God, you two! Like, do we need an intervention here? Are you
Sorry,
two still friends?
I mean, there's no race. I'm having so much fun.
Are you two still friends? What's happening?
At what point has Sargent looked like he was anywhere near close to challenging Albon?
Jeddah.
Piastri is
Jeddah. I'm sorry, Jeddah. He was full on Q3, like third race of the year.
Okay,
if it weren't for that track limits violation, he would have been in Q3, and that would have been a huge thing. So yes, I will give you that. I think if you ask me who's more talented, I would say Piastri. I wouldn't argue with that. But in terms of results, relative to where their teams are, it's not that different.
Okay, Cristina, I'm so sorry as a relatively new member of the panel. I'd love to say that it's not normally like this, but I don't want to lie to someone as accomplished as
No,
yourself.
this is quite extreme by us, even by our standards.
So let's move on to something a little less emotive. So Nick de Vries was a rookie brought in under what now seems like fairly odd circumstances, with Christian Horner being against it and it sort of being pushed on him, with him being a Mercedes driver, but also coming in on the hype of being an FIA champion with Formula E. So did he do enough? Did he do enough to get a bit more of a chance? Because Matt says he should have 10 years to prove that he can do quite well. But we kept hearing his name for the wrong reasons. And it was, little incidences. It was binning it in qualifying. It was just tapping that wall where other people didn't. Street circuits seemed to be a very specific chink in his armor, Cristina. But were Red Bull too harsh? Was he doing okay? Given that his benchmark was Yuki Tsunoda.
I think he was being judged way too hard. And there's two things here. The first being that a lot of people pointed out he was still driving the F1 car as if it was a Formula E car, where you get a lot more punchy, where you have your elbows out in a very different way. Formula E, they're constantly banging into each other and it's perfectly normal. Whereas here, that's not acceptable at all. It's a very different environment, and him needing that time to adjust is fair. The other big thing is that I don't think that it was at all about his performance why he got axed. I think it was entirely about the fact that they wanted Daniel Ricciardo. They want him back in that Red Bull seat. No matter what they say about Checo being safe, it's like, I'm sorry, but if Danny can get anywhere close to Checo's performance, if they have a choice between their favorite, who I'm sorry, but I'm convinced that if Christian Horner could, he would have Sebastian Vettel, Max Verstappen, and Daniel Ricciardo sitting on Santa's lap for his Christmas card each and every year. These are his favorite drivers. He wants them all home. He doesn't care about De Vries. They want Danny Rick back in that Red Bull seat if he comes close to Checo's performance. And this is part of that big plan. They wouldn't have been pointing out De Vries's mistakes if they didn't have Daniel waiting in the wings. They would have just ignored AlphaTauri like they keep doing these past 2 years. Oh.
Right. So I just want to.
As I'm drinking a Red Bull.
No, I want to jump in on this because I agree with you. I think De Vries was a terrible choice for them to begin with. I think they knew he was a terrible choice. I don't believe the team ever really gave him the support someone like that would need to be successful. And at the end of the day, I think they only went with him, one, because of the optics, And two, because they hoped, and I think this is why we saw him dispatched so rapidly from AlphaTauri, they hoped he would provide a benchmark as a seasoned driver for Yuki Tsunoda, that they could judge Tsunoda and say, oh yeah, we can see clearly he's got Red Bull potential, or oh yeah, clearly he does not. And the fact of the matter is, he never made that happen. Now, whether that's Nick's fault or the team's fault, or as is usually the case, a combination of a lot of different factors, is really irrelevant. What I can tell you is that he did finish ahead of Yuki twice. His best finish was 12th, and his best three finishes were 12th, 14th, and 14th. And relative to everybody else on this board, except for Ricciardo, who's only had 2 races and may not actually be a rookie as far as we're concerned, it's not as good as the others did. So if we're at the Great British Bake Off and the end of the week and somebody's got to go, well, yeah, from a statistical point of view, De Vries absolutely earned the axe.
I don't like that show. I think it's quite boring. I think watching people make food is dull, and like it's even more dull watching people judge whether food is good or not.
I agree with so much of what's been said, but that point right there is
it's a terrible show. And the fact that Americans have become obsessed with the great British people.
Have you seen what my
cake.
daughter now bakes because of that show? Hush your mouth.
I don't let my daughter do that because I struggle enough not eating cake all the time. But it's a bad show and a bad premise, and Americans are wrong for having embraced that so deeply.
Have you seen what they put on TLC? Like, American TV standards are very different.
Oh, that explains it. Okay, so if American TV is that dire that you're all having to watch British people cook in a variety of competence, so like it's not even like the best people cooking, it's people having a go at cooking and then being berated for not cooking very well most of the time. Yeah, I'm judging all of you. That is not a good show. Anyway, Chris, continue.
Can I talk about Nick de Vries?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I forgot. Is that what we were talking about?
Oh, wait. Is this an F1 show? I just keep getting lost.
Can you tell I'm literally going on holiday tomorrow?
Yes.
Ah, I see.
So I agree with largely everything that's been said, but I will refute the adaptability argument as a defense for de Vries, because for me, he's used to running multiple programs in a season. He used to combine Formula E with the World Endurance Championship, very different type of racing. But even putting that aside, if you have to be reminded not to drive a Formula E car with an electric motor on street tires and no downforce where you bang into each other constantly, and not drive a Formula One car like that, then frankly, you don't deserve to be on the Formula One grid.
All right.
Maybe.
Savage. All right, let's move on to some of the other teammate battles. This is really interesting, Matt. This is a great piece of work by you because it means that you actually got in there and you had a spreadsheet and used a calculator, I assume.
Well, yes.
There you go.
Like I would do that math in my head.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, this is good. This is good. If you see the percentage of points each teammate got, I'll run down the list quickly, and then we'll see, what people might want to comment on. Not really a surprise. Max 62% of Red Bull's points. Mercedes Lewis 60% of Red Bull's points. Alonso 76%. Leclerc 52, so that's close. Norris 67, but Piastri's kind of, as we've said, starting to get a grip of stuff. Really? Is that what you're doing?
Yes.
Okay,
I'm having fun here. Come on.
Ocon 61. Can't believe that stat got included. Hulkenberg 82. Whew. That's I'm a Kevin Magnussen fan. That hurts. We might have to visit that one first. Albon and Tsunoda 100%. Although that's a little bit different down the bottom of the grid, because F1 still refuses to give people points all the way to the bottom, which they absolutely should. Okay, where should we start? Let's start with Haas. Is there any Kevin Magnussen fans apart from me in the panel?
Well, I quite like him.
Oh, you quite like him. That's different to being a fan and a well-wisher. So I was a well-wisher of Kevin Magnussen.
I'm a well-wisher of Kevin. I'm a well-wisher of a lot of drivers.
All right, okay, but this is looking bad. So he was up. He looked good against Grosjean, I would say.
Yeah.
It looked like Haas had an actual good driver pairing. Hulkenberg coming in, like the ultimate journeyman super sub driver, I would have put all my space points on Magnussen beating Hulkenberg.
Yeah.
It has been remarkable how wrong I was on that. I put it all down to Magnussen continuing to breed. I don't think having kids is something that Formula One drivers should do. I think each kid is worth three tenths minimum, because like you're so tired. Babies are awful. If you're listening to my voice and you don't have children, really think about it. It absorbs everything. Like if you think I'm a bad presenter now, you know, I was slightly less bad before children. And with each kid, I lost the ability to speak a little bit more. My golf handicap increased by 8 when my second child was born. I lost my gaming room, okay? I lost my gaming room. I had a whole room just for computer games. And my second child stole it to sleep in. Just to sleep in, Chris. So no wonder Kevin Magnussen can't keep up.
For me, this is one of the biggest surprises of the season.
It is, yeah,
so far.
Yeah, you're right.
You could argue that the performance of the Haas is so peaky, and that's maybe why there is a larger points discrepancy. But coming to think of it, it's always normally Hulkenberg ahead of Magnussen, regardless of where they are in terms of the actual team order on any given Grand Prix. And it really does recontextualize the last few years of Haas's driver lineups, because of course, remember, we started off in the woeful era with Mazepin and Schumacher, and they got rid of Mazepin for Magnussen, and Magnussen wiped the floor with Schumacher, so they got rid of Schumacher, and now Hulkenberg's wiping the floor with Magnussen. I think there's an awful lot to be said there.
Without any evidence at all, because like I just did the percentages here, I'm going to go with my perception of the Haas, much like the Aston, is it was very front-loaded in terms of its performance relative to the field. I don't see Magnussen as always being that far off of Hulkenberg and occasionally ahead of him, but I think he's had, and now we could blame it on the kids here, extraordinarily bad luck between qualifying and the race in terms of, you know, having incidents and cars not working out for him. But most of the points available to Haas happened very early in the season, and Hulkenberg gathered the majority of those. And I think that's why you see this number like this. I suspect that if they keep him around for next season, you will see a more even battle. But the Haas project has almost as many problems as the Alpine project does, just in different ways, unfortunately. So I think it's going to be a bit of a random swing. Because neither driver really has the car they need to be consistent and successful at the moment.
Peaky performance. I really hope Kevin Magnussen can kind of get it together. Like I'm not even joking. Like when you have a little baby, everything changes, and like you have pressures at home because no matter how supportive the mother of his children is, there will be different pressures. He will be expected to do different things when he's at home. And instead of all the time on the phone, oh, how is your race car race going? I hope it's going really well. The focus of it changes a lot. Like the phone calls when we had little babies, when I was away working around the world, was, oh my God, this horrific thing has happened. Please help me fixing this over the phone on a video call whilst you're in a random bar in the arse end of nowhere around the world fulfilling some contract you care nothing about. It's very, very different. So maybe as that settles down, if he can survive this contract and be in F1 in 2024, then perhaps he can sort of resettle and go again, unless he makes the terrible mistake to have 3 children, which is exactly the wrong amount of children to have. If you're going to have children, for the love of God, stop at 1 or 2. Anyway, let's move on to Aston Martin. And there is a Canadian issue here. So, Cristina, I assume you're a Lance Stroll fan, and the percentages are that Lance Stroll only has 24% of Aston Martin's points.
It's bad. It's bringing shame to the nation.
Shame to the nation. I wasn't expecting that quite.
But we have very high standards, okay?
Right.
If he's our one and only, like coming off of last year, we need to have a bit more Canadian pride.
Yeah.
There needs to be a little bit more effort.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, It's partially because, yes, Alonso is a two-time champion and he's absolutely phenomenal. And Lance is a solid midfield driver. And it kind of feels like
he is
just slipping a little bit below average now, which when you're in an Aston Martin at the start of the season, that was a good setup, that was a well-performing car, especially comparatively to everybody else.
And still...
This is very bad. And no, he can't really get fired. He has to choose to leave and step away. But you do have to wonder if he lost that little bit of mojo that he had and is now kind of just like what is he doing?
I don't know. So like when Perez won in Istanbul in the pink in the Force, it was Racing Point. It was pink, wasn't it?
The Sakir Grand Prix.
Yeah, the Sakir Grand Prix. When he won that, there was this shot of Lawrence Stroll next to his son, pointing at Perez, saying that could have been you, that should have been you, or something like that. So there's very much this kind of, this fatherly push for him to go forward, and I believe that Lance Stroll is making an earnest effort, but he's come up across one of the greats of Formula One, and it's not looking good. So you have to kind of wonder, well, what's the game plan going forward for Project Stroll? Like, is there any hope for it, or is this now a busted flush? Did they think, oh, he did quite well against Vettel, he's going to also look quite good against Alonso, therefore we've shown the world. Look, he was quite good against Alonso. Of course, Alonso beat him. He's one of the greats. Then Alonso retires. Then Aston Martin become great and he becomes world champion. But that project has been derailed because Christina's right. I think he is hireable as a midfield number 2 driver. But honestly, like any hope Project Stroll had of showing him to be a top driver, Matt, is now gone.
And I'm going to briefly resist the opportunity to bring Ocon into this conversation. And instead, what I want to talk about, and this is legitimate now, is the fact that he had that preseason accident, missed all of testing. And again, we talk about Aston being front-loaded in terms of how they plan to score their points for the season. He was at his weakest when the car itself was at its strongest. And so I think from a percentage point of view, this might be overstating the Alonso versus Stroll battle a little bit.
So what you're saying is that teammate battles involving Alonso can have misleading stats. Is that what you're saying? Are you saying, Matt, that the points for one of Alonso's teammates might not necessarily be the greatest indicator of overall performance between those two teammates?
Well, I'm just saying you have to consider context when you're looking at something like 76% versus 24%, and make sure that you're accurately reflecting reality.
I would never consider that kind of context when, say, comparing Alonso versus Ocon in the points. So I
obviously did much better in the points than Stroll is currently doing. Yes, thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, but what you're saying is we should apply context to the points difference between Ocon and Alonso as well. Okay, good. Now,
almost like we should apply context to rookie battles against their teammates as well, but that's by the by.
This is crazy talk. Okay.
Oh, Chris you're still smarting from that, are you? I'm sorry. It was really just
I love it when you do an absolute U-turn on your own opinions. For me, Spanners.
Okay.
The future of Project Stroll, though, should be forget Formula One, because you don't have to be in Formula One to be considered a top-line driver. If anything, being in Formula One this long has damaged his reputation too much. Take that Aston Martin Valkyrie project that they, for some reason, shelved. Actually go and take it to Le Mans and stick him in endurance racing, where he suddenly has a much, much better chance of ending up on top, because you're a combination of 3 drivers. And what you tend to get is the not as good drivers, their performance can be masked a little bit more, and you can still come out on top. And for me, if they went ahead and won the Le Mans 24-hour, that would be enough to change the perception of Lance Stroll. Because look at what happened with Antonio Giovinazzi this year, for example. Nobody thought or anything of him in Formula One. Now he's a Le Mans 24-hour winner, and we all think very differently of him.
And Matt?
Well, I guess the thing that occurs to me is that Alonso is not forever for the Formula One world. We know that Aston has allegedly had a toy taken away from them by the FIA.
Oh, yes. We'll I was going to say, Matt, we will. I think we go into that another time when there's a bit more information.
Yeah, no, I agree. But this all plays into, I don't think the people evaluating Lance are under any illusions about his performance relative to Aston. But I do believe that that number is a little bit misleading relative to the Alonso versus Stroll absolute comparison. And frankly, if I'm his dad and Alonso gets me a car that can win a world championship, but then is too old to win it, and my son wins it, well, then, hey, these things happen. That's what I would say.
Excellent. That's a great start to our summer content. So please stay tuned to Missed Apex Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on your podcatcher of choice so that you're downloading every single episode, even if you're not listening. I know it's a bit naughty, but just do the auto download thing. That really, really helps us. And because of you guys, like, we're doing fantastically in the charts. So thank you so much. In the iTunes charts, in the US and the UK, we're regularly 4th or 5th. So we are 4th or 5th behind the BBC effort, P1 with Matt and Tommy, and the race media. And then after that, it's us. And we are often in the US charts above the race media as well. And while in the US charts, number 1 is The Ringer. And they have a very handsome and clever contributor on for their race reviews for most races as well. So thank you so much for tuning in. But make sure you do subscribe and download, and go and check out our YouTube as well, so you can see our faces and stuff and what we look like. And if you're enjoying this, do consider supporting us. Patreon.com/MissedApex. $1.99 for an ad-free feed. $5 is basically the next tier up, but you get everything else. You get the Slack group, you get the extra content, and you get the satisfaction of knowing that you are helping independent content creators continue to do this silliness. If it wasn't for you, we would face a lot more pressure from other things. But because we are so well supported on Patreon, we continue to just do this knowing that we are secure for the next year or so. And people drop out of Patreon all the time. So just come and cycle in, see if it's for you. Patreon.com/MissedApex. Go and follow our panel. Cristina Mace. Cristina with no H. So just Cristina. Cristina Mace. It's the Gravel Trap F1 pit stop. And that has been going strong all year. And you guys, like I said before, you cover a lot of different topics. It's a sideways look at F1, and like you said, I think you were saying it's less time sensitive.
It is. The goal is to put out timeless information that is going to be relevant for a couple seasons at least before regulations change, and I have to go in and highlight everything again. But a lot of regulation talk, a lot of history about the tracks. It's a good time over at Gravel Trap F1.
So no, that's not what we do. We chuck stuff out that is almost immediately irrelevant. So often I look back at, if I ever catch a show from like a month ago, I go, oh man, we did get that out pretty quickly, but man, we were very, very wrong. So go and follow Cristina. The links will be in the show notes below. Chris Stevens has no problem. Like, I think, like, you and I and Matt, we were the ones that were like, let's just spit this stuff out quickly. Don't worry about facts. We ain't no journos. Let's just say things.
That was all hard for me because I was a journalist
you were a
at the
journo
time
at the
as well.
time.
So I really, really wanted to take a bit more time over it. But,
no, to be fair, it has always just been me that has gone, I will say things as soon as they come into my brain, and if they're wrong, so be it. But thankfully, I have people like you and Matt and Cristina and to a lesser extent the others to correct me immediately.
Also, I'm not a journalist anymore, so it doesn't matter. I haven't got a reputation to uphold.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not a journalist. I've had arguments on radio where someone said, oh, well, you didn't really research that. And I've gone, yes, I'm definitely not a journalist. But this was the actual management. And they said, well, perhaps you could have some journalistic qualities. And I said, no, I don't know how to do that. And that's the story of why I'm not on radio anymore. But go and follow Chris.
Yeah, the journalistic qualities do help me out in the commentary box.
Of course they do.
Which you can hear me on, and you can see elements of my new commentary career at Chris on Racing on my social medias.
Do it. And Matt?
And if you want to hear him, you can watch our latest iRacing videos where he is the sole commentator.
Yeah, solo commentary is really hard. But I also would direct everyone to our Formula Renault 3.5 Round 2 at Silverstone. Links will be in the show notes below. If you just want to watch a bit of sim racing, if you're a fan of it, or you just want to see how badly a Spanners can do starting P3 in the reverse top 20, then yeah, by all means, watch me throw away a podium in race 2. And I'm assuming, Chris, that the commentary was very, very kind when that happened.
I can't... To be honest, I cannot remember how I noted this.
He cannot confirm or deny.
But
that you
can we just resist showcasing any kind of quality on my half from that particular production?
Why?
Just because I don't want to guarantee any kind of.
Are you saying you were terrible? Okay.
I thought it was, it was far from my best.
Well, I think that Chris at 80% is definitely better than most people at 100%. He's a commentator that will be taking over. You will be sick of hearing Chris Stevens in the future. And you're already sick of hearing Matt Trumpets. Go and follow him at MattPT55. And it's not your birthday anymore. I don't have to be nice to you. Follow me. Follow me.
You have to be nice to me because I'm old now.
Follow me at Spanners Ready on Twitter. Like I said, all the links in the show notes below. Go and follow all of us. Spam our Twitters and our Instagrams. And now, coming up, I'm going to play you the interview with Jan Moldenborough and Archie Madekwe. And I'll confess straight up that I was like an excited puppy dog. And I was so in awe of being on this. It was all virtual press junkets. So I had to go through like Sony Pictures official handling, and I had to go through their like vetting procedure. And by the time we got to the interview, I was just going, oh my goodness, I'm speaking to people from a Hollywood film. And also I was very sweaty. It was a hot day and I had adrenaline pumping through my bones. But if there is going to be a film about sim racing clashing with motor racing, it's so in my ballpark that I will not apologize too much for how excited I was. So the movie is Gran Turismo, based on a true story. And here's me speaking to the stars and the inspiration behind a actual in-cinema Hollywood movie. Hey everyone, Spanners here. I've got possibly the coolest interview we've ever had here on the show. Here on Missed Apex, obviously we're massive motorsport fans, but we're also keen sim racers of varying talent. So if you tell me there's a movie about a sim racer that ended up on real tracks around the world because of how good a sim racer he was, I would say, hook me up. Well, there is such a movie. It's called Gran Turismo, based on the real-life GT Academy that took the best sim racers in the world and put them on track. Joining me is that sim racer turned deity, Jan Moldenborough. Hey, how's it going, Jan?
Very good, man.
And also joining me today, we have the actor that brought it to life on the big screen. We've got Archie Madekwe. Hello, Archie.
Hey, how's it going?
Archie, I've seen the film. Archie, you were absolutely fantastic. It really did just paint a picture of what a normal, relatable guy Jan was, just with a dream in his heart.
Oh, thanks. That's really kind of you. Thank you very much.
And I would say, did you stalk him to find that out? Because if I was having a film made about me, I would make sure that I also got portrayed as a very nice, relatable guy.
Well, I think spending just 5 minutes with Jan, you realize that pretty quickly. No stalking required. But I did spend a lot of time with Jan before filming. As soon as I attached to the project, I immediately reached out. We jumped on the phone and we just started talking incredibly honestly and openly. You know, I was just so grateful for how the trust that he kind of put in me and how open and honest he was with me about his life. And I just wanted to know everything, even if it wasn't going to be in the film. I just asked him to start from the start, tell me about your life. And then those conversations just didn't stop. Jan was on set with us the entire time. He did all of his own stunt driving. And so it just meant that he was this endless pool of knowledge. And anytime I had any doubts, any questions, any queries, I mean, he was there to answer them. I mean, it was dream come true situation.
And Jan, how did he do? To see yourself or a copy of yourself on the big screen must be amazing.
Archie nailed it. I've only recently watched the movie, and of course I know what's happened because it's my life and I was there. But yeah, he did an absolutely fantastic job. To have my life put onto screen, part of my life put onto screen is very unusual, a blessing as well. and hopefully people can it can spark some thinking within people to take some positivity out of it. So yeah, it's been fantastic.
As a wannabe sim racer and karter, like, I now assume that I'm definitely going to end up on real life tracks and at Le Mans. I'm sure it will definitely happen.
It will,
for me.
dude. I think it will.
Yeah.
Definitely will.
Gotta dream big, man. Gotta dream big.
And this is what I was going to ask you, because in all Hollywood movies, they always say to you, what you really need to do is you just need to believe. All those losers didn't believe hard enough. When you were actually at the academy or even qualifying for it, Jan, did it actually feel possible at the time?
I saw it with, I explained it with doors. So I was presented with a door with GT Academy in position of my life, just dropped out of uni, and this door had uni was closed. So I was like, okay, Grand GT Academy, okay, that door, let's see how far we can go. Let's open that one, and then let's open the other ones, and then of course one, and then presented with this childhood dream, and just to see how far I could go. But my intention was to see how far I can go, but I never thought I could win, only up until the last day, the last race where I thought I had a chance of winning. It wasn't like I'm going to win, it was like I have a chance. It was a very strange mindset, but it's done me well. But I was very sure ever since I was probably 11 that being a racing driver is what I want to do with my life. And if an opportunity presented itself, I'm all in. I had to wait a long time for that to happen and be very lucky as well. But I never let that candle, that little fire, go out completely, because life throws mud and dirt and darkness at you. But it was always that. And I was at the right place at the right time and then put in the work.
You obviously believed exactly the right amount to get you to where you were. But I, as a keen sim racer myself, I was watching the hand movements and the racing in the cockpit. Archie, I have to say, you were incredibly believable as somebody, facing the physical shock of a sports car. So I do wonder. I know Jan was doing some stunt driving, but how much did they get you involved or bully you into doing some track racing or some sim racing?
Any time you see me in the car, I'm in the car going at full racing speed. There is no shot where it's static or going slower. I'm at full racing speed. And so the shock, all of those things, all of that is real.
It's real.
That is very, very real. It was truly one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life. Sim racing wise, I mean, months before I got there, they sent me a whole GT setup, and I had an unbelievable racing instructor, David Perel, who had a very similar story to Jan, was a sim racer and I races for Ferrari. And we would just, every single day, we would just practice, because it's just repetition with GT and just learning those tracks and learning those corners. And I would have him in, when I was in the car, I'd have him in one ear, reminding me like hand placements and just anything that I needed to do to make it more believable. I was constantly being told. And then the car. I don't know how much money you would pay me to do it again, but it's. I'm glad I did it. The film's definitely worth it.
I'm sort of disappointed. Like, Archie, that was such good acting. How did they recreate that? Well, they threw me around in a sports car until I was terrified.
Basically, it was not. I'm sorry. There was no acting. Like, it's all my sweat. It's all that G-force. I mean, when my face moves, it's because my face is moving at 160, 70 miles an hour. It was just ridiculous craziness.
And Jan, how close to real was that? Because obviously you would have faced that shock from a sim rig into real life race cars. The film really portrays it as, oh dear, what have I got myself into?
Yes. However, getting into GT Academy and winning it, my mindset was, okay, whatever is required of me to be the best I can be in racing with all my mentors, I'm going to have to do that. It's fine. Let's go through that. So yes, it's extremely taxing on the body. Yes, it's very intense with press, very intense with racing on circuits. You have rivals, you have the self-evaluation, the self-doubt at times as well, everything. So it's, but I was prepared for that because this is what I want to do with my life. It gives me purpose.
Mm-hmm. So with all that going on, actually driving the car, the bit you love, was probably, you get in the car and you go, okay, well, I've got this bit. I know what I'm doing here.
So, there's a saying he was talked to a lot of drivers, and before the race, there's so much stuff you've got to do. And the moment where it's the most peaceful and most calm is the moment just before the start of the race. You put on your helmet, everybody goes away. All the team go away, all the press go away, all the mechanics and interviewers, and just you strapped in your car, really tight with your helmet on. It's just like, engine's just about to get engines on. You're not yet racing, but it's like, finally, I can do what I want to do and do the best thing. And for me, it's bliss. It really is bliss. It's the best.
Well, how did you rate Archie once he, got thrown in the cars and got given his sim rig?
So Archie, seeing what he went through, Archie, these cars are small. They're not big cars, and they're made out of carbon. And usually, all the time, when a driver sits in the car, we have a seat, a nice kind of foam padded seat. Archie's very tall. Archie couldn't use one of those seats, so he sat on bare carbon, going at that speed, being strapped in, so he's feeling everything.
Oh, to make him shorter?
In order for him to fit in the car without the helmet.
Oh, wow.
The helmet was touching at some points. Has to sit on dry carbon. So you know what a race car's like. It's millimeters from the ground. He's feeling everything through a carbon chassis. No compression or anything. So, and he's acting as well. And he needs to know where the corners go, and got lines. He's very claustrophobic in there with the cameras. So he has respect for me. I have huge respect for you doing that, because you looked like you'd been through some tough stuff.
I'd been through the worst. I truly had. But we're on the other side.
Well, as a 5'7" gentleman, I'm glad you were uncomfortable in that car and hit your head on the cockpit. That makes me feel really happy.
Listen, haters gonna hate. I don't know what to tell you.
I tell you what, Archie, people are going to see you in this film and they're going to want you in their movies. But this early in your career, working with huge stars like Orlando Bloom, I want to ask you, what's he like to work with? Because he's talented, charming, ridiculously good looking, even in his 40s. Give me something. Tell me he had milk breath or something.
I don't know what to tell you about it. He's lovely. I mean, it just is, and I'm sorry, it's true. Everyone is. At the end of the day, everyone's at work, and everyone cares. Especially on a film like this, it was a lovely thing. Everybody just really was so excited to be there, and everyone was just on great form. It was just so lovely. So there was no, there's no time to worry about who somebody is or what somebody's done or etc. Everyone is just locked into character and how do we make this film the best film it could possibly be. So all of that stuff it goes out the window pretty quickly.
Everyone was lovely, because Djimon Hounsou completely, I hope this is not a spoiler, but I completely believed him as the stern dad. And I can't imagine that.
Kindest man in the world. I mean, he could
So they say cut.
And he is just smiling, laughing. I mean, you could not find a nicer human. Truly, he is the loveliest person. I would work with him again and again and again. He is just great.
There's a great dynamic between all of you, and of course, my kids got very excited. I haven't seen it, but Stranger Things, the dad in that, and when you've got a mentor guiding someone through, and you realise that people are trying to impart knowledge, but also they've got their own stories as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the really lovely, clever thing about the script. It's there's an underdog story for Jan, but it's also an underdog story for Jack, and they kind of find this harmony between the two of them through that together. It's lovely.
It really was. And I'm going to get a bit Star Trek convention-y here for Jan. When they say, in episode 54, the laser light from the photons, okay, in the movie, Archie's using a Logitech CSL direct drive, which is, at the moment, it's really good value, entry-level direct drive, about 5 or 8 Newton meters of force feedback, which is significant. You can feel the feedback from the tyres. But when you were starting out doing sim racing, and this was all around 2010, you didn't have access to anything probably as good as that.
So I had access to a Fanatec Turbo S wheel, which was belt driven.
Belt, right.
And I'd had that
so that's less force.
Yeah, I had that less than 6 months So I'd only had a wheel 6 months when I entered GT Academy, and I only had that wheel and pedals because I was so fed up of playing with the controller that I wanted to take the experience to the next level. So with the money that I had as a gift, well, not as a gift, but my GCSE results, my A-level results, my parents gave me some money thanks to my kind of average results. And I used that £300 to buy this wheel and pedals, and the frame that I used to qualify, I built that in school, which is represented in the...
You see it in the film, the frame that's it. It's exact. Is it the actual one or a replica?
No, replica.
It's a replica. It's the exact replica, literally the exact replica.
And it's painted in a certain way as well, because I designed it in school and halfway outside of school, because I was adamant I wanted my own rig. And it's painted, the design brief given to me while I was in school was design something in an Art Deco style. I'd already designed it, but I was like, oh, okay, how can I make this Art Deco? Okay, I'll just paint it in some weird Art Deco style, and it's exactly the same as it is in the movie. So I'm very happy about that.
And he only got a B.
And I got a B.
Oh, and he got a B. Ridiculous. Changed his life and he got a B.
To be honest, I'm glad the story went that way, because when you sort of paused for a moment, I thought it was going to be, I robbed it. So I'm glad it had a happier ending than that, because obviously there's some scenes with Archie getting in a little bit of trouble and having to use his driving skills to get out of them. Was any of that, was that real, Jan? Were you a bit of a maverick?
The stuff has happened before GT Academy with friends. That's exact, maybe not, but with the police, yeah. Things have happened.
We've all got history.
Well, it made for a fun start to the film. Yeah, it's really good. And one of the things about the film is it's an assault on the senses. It really focuses in on the car, Archie, and it's all about being in the car, having those lines in front of you, and imagining the racing line that you'd see on your PlayStation and trying to adapt that to track. But I just loved, it's not really a question, is it? I loved the fact that it was just a pure motorsport assault on you in your cinema seat.
Yeah, that's the genius of Neil Blomkamp. I think he was so adamant. That's part of the reason why he wanted everything to be done practically, because he wanted everything to feel so real. He wanted you to feel the heat, feel the speed, and I think you really do. I mean, it's kudos to him and our unbelievable DP and the cam ops. Like we just were able to get in so close to really feel every breath of those cars. It's amazing.
And I know there's going to be some wish fulfillment here from my viewers and listeners looking at Jan's story. And so we were talking about your belt-driven wheel. When you got on track, how much of your sim racing experience and how you felt your belt-driven wheel in your hands, how much of that helped you when you got in the car, or did you go, oh, wow, no, this is totally different?
Well, it's all I had. So I was surprised how normal it felt, the transition going from, say, that to jumping in a GTR at Silverstone for the first time. Knowing the circuit, that's something I've just realised as well. I knew Silverstone like I do today. But the way that the car handled, the way that the car would pitch in corners, your throttle brake inputs, your steering, that's all I had. I never did karting or anything like that. The only added sensation which I needed to tune with what I was getting through my hands was the vibration through my backside and my back. It was combining that added sensation and trying to align it with my vision and what I'm feeling through my hands. And that's not easy to develop straight away. So it took a while to trust it as well. To know where the limit is, you have to go over it and kind of peg it back. And just to get those sensors in a line, it's a bit of a journey, and especially with the eyes as well. So, but the way the car acts, it's I was kind of like, oh, it's working. Okay, I have to do this. The car normally does this. Okay, it's doing this in real life. Okay, cool. I can trust that. I'll remember that.
Nice.
And it just worked, And now people would take it not granted, but they just assume, yeah, if I drive this particular car on here, it's going to behave exactly like that in real life, and it does. That's just testament to the technology of Gran Turismo, the attention to detail that they have.
So I'm no good, but I have had a driver coach, teach me how to detect understeer, oversteer when I'm in the car. You know, it goes light, you're understeering, and you can feel like the grip up as you get to the edge of adhesion. And when I've taken that onto a kart track, I've literally gone, wow, it feels like that. And you just go, oh my goodness, you know, the sim isn't a complete waste of time. Nick, what would you know? But one line in the movie, I need to know whose idea this was, is when Archie, you corrected a friend in the movie that it's not a game, it's a sim. And that is something all us sim racers say at home over and over again. And, you know, I run these big tournaments and there's 200 people there. They're all treating it seriously. And my wife will say, are you off to play your little game? And you go, no, it's not a game, it's a sim. But whose idea was that?
I'm guessing that was Jason or Zach's. I don't think that was improvised. I think that was in there the entire time.
Yeah, it's a conversation we've had as well in person with Jason. It's I remember it's a sim. It needs to be a sim. It's not a game. It's not arcade. It's not, you know, something it's a simulator. So yes, that was in there.
To Jan, to Archie, and on behalf of, I'm going to speak for the whole sim racing community. Thank you for making this movie. Thank you for representing our world, and good luck with the rest of the tour.